Okay, if we're going to keep this recurring joke going about how excessive the Doctor Who Big Finish titles can be, Doctor Who Time War Uncharted 3 Branches should actually be called Doctor Who Time War 8 Cass 4 Uncharted 3 Branches. I'm convinced no one finds this bit funny but me, but I'm sticking with it. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and like I mentioned up front, today we're talking about Doctor Who Time War Uncharted 3 Branches. This is part of the 8th Doctor Time War Uncharted series, where the 8th Doctor is trying to escape the Time War with his great-grandson Alex, played by Sonny McGann, and also in the adventures he's reunited with Cass, or sort of reunited with Cass from the Night of the Doctor 50th Anniversary short, the short-lived hopeful companion that the 8th Doctor met during that special. However, at the end of the last box set, Pursuit, Cass was missing. They had no idea where she was, so the Doctor and Alex are charting this uncharted alternate universe, and as you can see from the cover, they do meet a version of Cass from this, quote, uncharted universe. This is Cassie, who is a pirate, or should I say a space pirate, and this box set also stars Carole Ann Ford as Susan. In this box set, Branches, we have a quartet of stories. We have The Only Girl in the World by John Dorney, False Dawn by Alison Winter, The Council of Susan by Tim Foley, and All Over by Patrick O'Connor. We're going to go over these stories in order. Like I said, Branches picks up directly where Pursuit left off, so this will, by its nature, have some minor spoilers for Pursuit. You should really be following along with these box sets if you're listening to a review of this, but I've really enjoyed the Uncharted series so far. I think that the first Cass box set was a pretty weak start, all things considered, but it's really found its footing with this Uncharted sub-series, where the Doctor and Alex have this really strange relationship where he's trying to handhold his great-grandson through time and space, and Alex wants a bit more independence, wants the Doctor to actually trust him in these new adventures, and they are in this Uncharted universe where the Daleks do exist. However, the Time Lords are actually the Sontarans. It's some sort of weird alternative timeline where the Sontarans won the invasion of time, the 4th Doctor story where the Sontarans invaded Gallifrey. So the Sontarans are the Lords of Time, and there is no time war, or at least there's no active time war in this Uncharted universe, but the Doctor and Alex are trying to find Cass. And in The Only Girl in the World, they do indeed find Cass. They lock onto her biosignature, but they find this universe equivalent. They find Cassie Famatsi, who is a space pirate who is trying to instill an uprising on this spaceship, which has this interesting, unique Dalek variant on it. It's this half Dalek, half human synthetic creation voiced by Nicholas Briggs called Mr. Carl. And this spaceship is effectively travelling through the time vortex, and there's time displacement depending on where in the ship you are, so Mr. Carl has weeks and months to prepare for any potential uprising from the people on the ship, and Cassie cannot overcome that disadvantage. However, the Doctor and Alex are there to help. They want to help Cassie, they want to try and find their version of Cass, so the Doctor and Alex team up with Cassie to try and take down Dr. Carl.
She answered to her own name.
Well, sort of. I prefer Cassie.
Exactly. Close but no cigar. I mean, look at the outfit.
Well, Cass changes her clothes all the time. It's not like she has a uniform.
But has she ever really gone quite this pirate? That's a bit more swashbuckling than her usual style. That sword in particular is a nice touch.
Do not touch my sword.
I wouldn't dream of it. Never mess with a lady's sword. That's my motto. Not a particularly good one, if I'm honest. Never really comes up. I think this might actually be the first time. She'd probably get a new one.
What are you talking about?
It's actually surprisingly simple.
You remind us of a friend of ours who happens to have a very similar name. But really, it's just a trick of the light. It's quite dark in here. Now I get the chance to look closely. You don't look like her at all.
But, Doctor...
Alex, look again. I think you'll find you agree.
Yes, I suppose you're right.
There is a whole universe of difference between them. Not our friend, but also not the portent of an imminent apocalypse. So, you know, swings and roundabouts.
And I suppose it's best we don't complicate matters any further.
Exactly.
The Only Girl in the World has some interesting shades of World Enough in Time and the Doctor Falls from the Series 10 of the TV series, where you have the time dilation on that massive ship that's being pulled towards a black hole. But that's kind of where the similarities begin and end there. These are two very different stories. A big chunk of this episode is based around trying to reacquaint audiences with Cass, or with this new variant with Cassie, and I think that Emma Campbell-Jones does a really good job at differentiating these two different versions of the same character. Cassie is way more bold, and she is a swashbuckling pirate captain. She's more outspoken, she's more impulsive, and I think that's enough to really differentiate and really change the dynamic of the TARDIS crew in this particular story. Cassie is way more headstrong. Emma Campbell-Jones really does a great job at portraying that, and the writers really pick up on that element of the character to really throw her into the stories more than Cass was before. A lot of the Time War Uncharted stories, I've enjoyed them as stories, but a lot of it kind of gets bogged down in why are you reintroducing Cass into the Doctor Who universe, other than this is something from the TV series we can use for Big Finish. And so far, I don't think they've really overcome that hurdle for me personally. However, Cassie as a character in and of herself is an interesting roll of the dice in order to try and mix things up in these stories. And I think the non-linear way that The Only Girl in the World plays out, it just adds an extra narrative wrinkle that I found really interesting. The MVP for this story, though, for me at least, is Nicholas Briggs as Mr. Carl, playing this really suave and almost kind of elegant half human, half Dalek creature. I couldn't quite visualize it. That is a slight issue, I think, with the story. I don't actually know what type of form this Dalek variant takes, but Nicholas Briggs' performance and the way that he's written, almost like the Joker to Paul McGann Doctor's Batman, I thought that was a really fascinating, unique approach to the story that you could have maybe based an entire box set around, but no, it's just a single Dalek variant in this one story, in this one box set. It is kind of indicative of how many great ideas and how many unique premises that you can have in a Time War box set, in a Time War story like you have here, but they maybe might have missed a trick here by, introducing and then getting rid of Mr. Carl in the same episode. But Nicholas Briggs is clearly having a lot of fun with this, and the amount of variance that he can have for the Dalek voice and the Dalek personalities, it really is a sight to behold. But I like the theme in The Only Girl in the World, and by extension the rest of the box set, where Cassie believes that it's her destiny to face off against the Daleks and be able to save her homeworld, which was destroyed by the Daleks in the Uncharted universe because of some cosmic coincidences when she left the planet, and she believes it's her God-given destiny to be a hero. And then you just have the Doctor who sort of laughs in the face of destiny and tries to set her on the on a much more active path, and I think that's a really interesting dynamic. I like this idea of the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object with the Daleks and Cassie here. But next up we have False Dawn by Alison Winter, and this story, it seems like a throwback to early experimental 8th Doctor audios like Scherzo or Zagreus, and if that perked up your ears while listening to this review, I have a feeling that you're really going to enjoy False Dawn. So in the Uncharted universe, there's this galactic quarantine going on, and it's this really invasive plant species that is being overseen by a character called Sage, voiced by Susan Penhaligon, and the Doctor ends up getting stung by one of these plants and effectively goes in a weird sort of dreamlike coma, and he's able to communicate with Cassie and Alex through this coma, and is also speaking to Hieronyma Friend. Now, Hieronyma Friend is a Time Lord character, I think he's a Time Lord character, or they're a Time Lord character, I should say, who is taking on the faces and the voices of the 8th Doctor's previous companions. And in Time War Uncharted 3 Branches, we get the voice of Daphne Ashbrook, who played Grace Holloway in the 1996 TV movie. So Grace Holloway is basically the face and the appearance of Hieronyma Friend in this box set. So you have Alex and Cassie on their own trying to force their way through this quarantine, all the while trying to communicate with the Doctor, who is in this coma dreamlike state, and try and rise him out of it somehow. All the while the Doctor is going through Dream Layer and is uncovering through his dreams a potential Dalek invasion plan in the Uncharted universe.
A dream within a dream.
Nightmares like Russian dolls, me slowly suffocating. My great-grandson murdered in front of me, a fleet of particle-sized Daleks forming a metal wave across the universe that pulls everything with it.
Well, that's absurd. Daleks don't behave like that, do they?
No, they don't. And Time Lords don't behave like Sontarans. This universe, the inside is playing with the outside.
There are no Daleks in this universe, Doctor. Not anymore.
No, the Daleks here died centuries ago, but their casings are still out there, and something has crawled inside.
We do not crawl.
From plant pot to pepper pot, one might say.
False Dawn is a trippy one. The Only Girl in the World played around with non-linear storytelling, but False Dawn really dives into it. I'm kind of glad that it took this order in the box set so that The Only Girl in the World can sort of brace you for this sort of experimental non-linear storytelling. It really does a good job at easing the listener into the type of storytelling that False Dawn and Alice in Winter are going for here. It does a great job at throwing the listener and the characters off balance in this new universe through multiple ways. I think that Sage is a really great presence. She makes another appearance later on in the box set, but Susan Penhaligon is giving a really endearing performance. These sort of weird, almost sort of Time Lord-esque characters with titles and some an air of sophistication and pomposity around them, who the Eighth Doctor relates to and meets over the course of his travels in the Uncharted universe. I think that she's a great addition to the lore of this universe. I think that the idea of these dream layers and dream layers that the Doctor is sort of fighting through with his own subconscious and his own memories. You know, it's sort of like that Simpsons joke where Homer is talking to the coyote and he's like, this is just your memory, I can't give you any new information. And that's what the Doctor's dealing with here, because he can't, you know, he's not actually communicating with any spirits or anything supernatural. He's like fighting within his own mind through this poison. And I think Paul McGann plays it really well. I like the frustration that Sonny McGann brings to like being left on his own, but with Cassie, who's someone like they've only just kind of met, and they're only really bringing Cassie along because she's got this sword with some alien inscriptions on it which could take them to their next destination. It's sort of like the log poses in One Piece where they need this specific tool to take them to the next destination. But I really like Alex's Hail Mary in the third act, which ultimately does bring the Doctor and Alex closer together as a family, and I thought that was a really nice touch. I think that Paul McGann and Sonny McGann do play these respective roles really well, and they do have a lot of like camaraderie and chemistry with each other behind the microphones. I think it really shows. I really like that familial connection. But if something like Zagreo and Scherzo really throws you off and you kind of want your Doctor Who audios to be, I don't want to say conventional because that sounds like I'm talking down to other stories that don't take this experimental non-linear approach, but you know, False Dawn is a difficult listen if you are multitasking, but if you give it your time, if you give it your full attention, I think you're going to find a really rich character-driven story here. But if you want something, quote, a bit more conventional, we have The Council of Susan by Tim Foley. So the Doctor, Alex and Cassie find themselves on this space station, which is overrun by Susans, and not Carol Ann Ford as Susan, but basically the Doctor's granddaughter Susan went to the Uncharted universe to hunt for the Doctor during the Time War, didn't find him, and left a message for these people to pass on to the Doctor if he came there. However, while Susan was there, she regaled them with stories of her adventures with the Doctor and Ian and Barbara, and this group of people made that an entire religion. And the cast of this Council of Susans, you've got Mother Susan, played by Jane Asher, you've got Cardinal Susan, played by Amy Roxon, and you've got this novice, like, underling Susan, played by Olivia Woolhouse. And all of these different Susans make up part of a hierarchy for this religion, where the first Doctor adventures with Susan, Ian and Barbara, with the Aztecs and the Sensorites and the Keys of Marinus and the Daleks and all this stuff, are the foundational texts for this religion. However, there is corruption within this Council of Susans, and a Dalek invasion is on its way.
We must be wary, Mother Susan. We've had heathens through our doors before.
No. I recognize the faithful. A recent trend is to dress as a favorite character, hence their strange attire.
Yes, you'll know who I am, of course.
You are dressed as Ian.
Close enough.
The suit is not quite right.
Oh, but he has captured his noble spirit, Cardinal. And you, with the air of a warrior, the wise and fierce Barbara.
I like the sound of her.
And I'm dressed as Alex.
Alex?
Ah, Susan's ally, Alexander the Great. That's your favorite, isn't it, Susan?
No, Alex. Susan's son. What? What did I say?
Heresy. Susan had no son.
I'm sure the boy meant no wrong, Cardinal.
Yeah, and he's not wrong. Of course Susan had a son.
Alex, not now.
Read the room, Messiah.
When I saw that Tim Foley was writing another 8th Doctor Time War story, I got very excited and giddy inside, and The Council of Susans is a really strong story, predictably with Tim Foley. What can I say? I'm a very easy chap to please. But I thought that Tim Foley's really rich character work really came to the forefront here, because you have all of these different Susan variants, which could get pretty boring, but Tim Foley's strong character work allows you to not only get a sense of the differing personalities and the sex and the hierarchies within the Council of Susans, but also just their own individual personalities and their own little idiosyncrasies which make them memorable even when you've stopped listening. There's a really great propulsive energy to the story as well. Not only do you have this Dalek invasion, but you also have this wormhole which the Doctor, Alex and Cassie have travelled through, and they need to get back through the wormhole, which is going to open in a few hours time, but the Daleks also want to get access to that wormhole. You know, it's just a really strong and solid story when it comes to its structure and its stakes. And also there's the compelling overriding mystery of what message does Susan leave for the Doctor? Did she actually leave one? Is something gone wrong in terms of how her stories have been interpreted and passed on by these different Susans? It's not an original idea from Tim Foley. There was the Return to Marinus from the Doctor Who Unbound box set earlier this year, but the idea of these very first stories with the Doctor, Susan, Ian and Barbara being like creation myths for the Doctor Who universe. Right? We saw how in the Return of Marinus box set, how the people of Marinus would act out plays and act out heroic retellings of the Doctor, Susan, Ian and Barbara, and Tim Foley's playing with a similar idea here, and he's not the first one to do it, but I think that's a really interesting trend in recent Doctor Who Big Finish. But there's some really interesting character work here as well, where the Doctor arrives at this Council of Susans and they don't really know that he is the Doctor from the stories. So when he hears these stories that were effectively the start of his adventures through time and space, and they don't really have a favourable opinion of the Doctor because he was quite mean to Susan sometimes and he was quite brutish and sharp with her, and it causes the Doctor to sort of reflect on the person that he used to be. And I think I think Paul McGann plays that really affectionately. And I also like the wrinkle that Alex being Susan's son, that's like almost blasphemous for the sacred Susan text. Like, no, Susan did not have children. So Alex is like, okay, what the fuck do I do? Whilst Cassie is sort of like, I've no idea what this whole family drama is that I've gotten in the middle. I only met you guys like a couple of days ago. Whatever, we're getting through that wormhole. I like how Cassie as a presence in this particular story just cuts through everything and like focuses on the end goal. And the last story is All Over by Patrick O'Connor. So the TARDIS crash lands on this ice world and the TARDIS is effectively smashed and destroyed and dead. And Hieronyma Friend is on this ice world as well at the edge of the universe and rescues the Doctor, Alex and Cassie for her own mysterious motivations. We still don't quite know what Hieronyma Friend's deal is, but once again they have the voice of Daphne Ashbrook. They take shelter in a rundown house at the edge of the universe. There's a secret monster in the basement that Hieronyma Friend has got as a weird creature pet / assistant thing. The Doctor is once again messing around in dreamscapes, whilst Alex and Cassie try and figure out what Hieronyma Friend is really up to and just what is going on at the edge of the Uncharted universe. All Over is a tough story to review because it's effectively a transition story to the next box set. It does end with a solid cliffhanger for the next Uncharted Time War box set, and a lot of the story is effectively just buying time to get to that cliffhanger. Like, I think that the story had a start point and then an end point, and basically Act 2 of All Over, it feels like a lot of busy work. Like, I enjoyed listening to it, and I think the performances are really, really strong, but it was basically just 50 to 60 minutes of just waiting around on an ice planet for the cliffhanger to happen. What I will say, though, is that All Over has some wonderful scenes with Susan. Like, it's not a spoiler to say that she's in this box set. She is on the cover, even if she's not in the Council of Susan story. And I think that this brief Uncharted reunion between the 8th Doctor and Susan is really, really wonderfully done. And interestingly, going through the behind the scenes of this box set as well, I think that they had a different plan for Susan when she's finally reunited with her son Alex. However, in the Companion Chronicles box set from last year, Ian Potter penned a story called Stardust and Ashes, which has Susan effectively sending Alex's ashes, because Time War, it's complicated, sending Alex's ashes in a firework up into the sky as his funeral, and all of a sudden Susan now sees Alex again. Alex may be a Dalek agent. It's some weird Dalek experiment. We don't know exactly what his deal is quite yet. So TLDR, I think they did have a different plan for Susan and Alex's reunion, but Stardust and Ashes was so good that they had to change the plans for what they were going to do with this reunion. And I think how they navigated it, how Susan as a character in particular navigates that reunion, is really lovely. I think Carol Ann Ford plays it brilliantly. Paul McGann's great as well. But yeah, it's not the reunion I expected when the penny drops when Susan meets Alex again, even though he's meant to be dead. But the way she navigates that scenario, the way she navigates that meeting, I thought it was really touching. The scenes with Hieronyma Friend are really great as well. Daphne Ashbrook is really terrific in this box set as this, you know, almost coy, seemingly enjoying the subterfuge before realizing that she may have bitten off a bit more than she can chew. You know, I like those sort of roles. But in terms of the actual plot substance of All Over, it's got really great imagery. Like the idea of this like rundown house at this frozen cliff edge at the edge of the universe, you know, really great imagery. But in terms of the actual plot itself, there's not a lot going on here. A lot of it is really buying time for the next box set, which is a bit of a shame, because with Time War Uncharted 3 Branches, you have 3.5 really good stories here, with a lot of great variety and some really effective like Dalek horror imagery. It's really insane how they continue to find cool and interesting things for the Daleks to do in the Time War. At the time of recording this video, we have no details on Time War 9 Cas 5 Uncharted 4, but when we do finally get a release, be sure to check out this channel for a review on it. But in terms of Branches, this was really strong. I thought this was a really, really good Time War story. I think Cassie is a breath of fresh air, because this different persona, this different character over the course of the box set. I like the, you know, that the damage that was done in the previous box set between the Doctor and Alex, it's not quite healed yet. They're trying to work their way through it. Carol Ann Ford is great in the brief appearance that she's got. I really liked Hieronyma Friend's appearances. The Daleks were strong here. It's a really well-rounded box set. I just think it's sort of narratively, it just kind of grinds to a halt towards the end, because we've got to get to the next box set and we need a cliffhanger. But apart from that, I really, really enjoyed it. For me, the standout is probably the Council of Susan, maybe the only girl in the world. Either way, there's some really interesting stuff happening here, and I did really enjoy this box set. But if for some reason you are at the end of this review and you haven't listened to any of these, don't dive straight into Time War Uncharted with Branches. You've got Pursuit, you've got Reflections, you've also... God, I don't like this menu from Big Finish. It's so easy to trigger. You've got Branches, you've got Pursuit, you've got Reflections, and you've got Cass. I think you could maybe skip Cass and just go straight into Uncharted 1. But either way, you can't dive straight into Branches. You've got a lot of work to do, folks. But anyway, that's my review of Time War Uncharted 3 Branches. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe for more Doctor Who Big Finish reviews. And folks, I'll see you all next time.